Is it Jonathan Oliveira raising his hand?
Yeah, thank you, Aurora. We're looking for folks that are on our list as well. Unless anyone tells us different, then folks will just be in the attendee room. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And if folks are maybe signed under some other name, or they think they, are panelists, that please let us know in the Q&A, and we'll be able to sort it out. Thanks.
And Richard, just to update you, the YouTube stream is live.
Mike, thanks. You're the best. Appreciate it.
No, thank you. And thank you, Rebecca.
I'll be remiss if I didn't mention Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you as well. My apologies. You guys have been very supportive.
No, Mike got it. He's a king.
No. That's how rumors get started.
So, folks, I see Jesse's hand. We should confirm if that is in fact when we promote.
Yes. Hi, Jesse.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Jesse.
Hello, Aurora. Hey, council members. How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Farah. Good evening, members. Sandra, Farah, Crystal. Good evening, everyone. I see everyone coming up on my screen now. Aurora, Ludres,
Hi.
Latoya. Good evening, everyone. And my colleagues at FACE and Learning Times. So my apologies for running a few minutes behind. I just was in a meeting prior, but I just wanted to quickly go over your agenda, received your agenda. So members, I'm just going to quickly kind of summarize it and then tell me if I'm wrong in any of it. So at around 6:20, 6:25, we start with our pre-announcements, where we give the interpreters an opportunity to make their interpretation announcements. And then I will introduce the executive superintendent, and then high school superintendent, and each of them will individually just give some brief greetings. And then I will introduce you, Farah, and then you will give your opening remarks. And then you will introduce Farah, you will introduce the Chancellor. And then after the Chancellor's remarks, then we will go to the Council's questions. And then once the Council's questions have concluded and we get to around 7:25, we then go to closing remarks of both the Chancellor and both of Farah. Did I summarize everything accurately?
I would say so, but I thought we were going to introduce members and logistics and stuff like that, like around right now. So we could 6:30 on the dot, just sort of start with the opening statement and introducing the Chancellor so that we can have more time for the questions.
So do you want to do that within a minute? We'll begin the pre-introductions, Farah, and then what I'll do is before the introduction of the Chancellor, I'm sorry, before the introduction of the superintendents, I will then defer to the members to introduce themselves.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Got it. So give me one moment, everyone. I'm just going to go off camera 1 second to adjust my mic a bit, and then I will be right back.
Farah, how you like Sheila?
I love Sheila. We have to extend to the rest of the council at a different time who Sheila is.
Folks, so just a quick reminder, you are live. We're broadcasting and we have attendees. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So what I'll do is let me begin, and then I will start with deferring to each of the members for introductions, and then we'll go to I want to give it to, I think we can do this within 10 minutes. I want to give it to 6:20 because I don't want to make the interpretation announcements before enough people have arrived at the town hall to hear it. So if we can start the pre-announcements at 6:20, I think we could still start exactly at 6:30. We'll get through everything at 6:30. If that works for you, Farah. If not, I'll start now.
I am trusting you, Jesse.
Okay. So what we'll do is thank you, Farah. So what we'll do
I'm
is we'll,
sorry to interrupt. Sabrina Rocchio is in the waiting room. She needs to be promoted to panelist. She's
Thank
one
you,
of our
folks.
CEC members.
We'll take care of that. And also, please feel free to use the chat feature. You can send us a direct chat so that we don't interrupt the process on the platform. That'll be extremely helpful, members.
so thank you, Richard. And what I'll do is just to that point, I wanted just to give a few minutes because I saw people were still joining us. So 3 minutes to 6:20, and we will start our pre-announcements promptly at 6:20.
Also Gina Staten.
So members, a quick time check. We're at 6:18, so we're 2 minutes away from the beginning of our pre-announcements. And members, we are at 6:19, and we will be starting in 1 minute. In fact, less than that, in 30 seconds. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's District 8 Town Hall. My name is Jesse Mojica, and I'm a Senior Director at the Division of Family and Community Empowerment, and I'll be your moderator for this virtual Town Hall meeting. It is important that all of our families are able to participate tonight, and we are very grateful to the Spanish, Bangla, and Arabic interpreters who are with us tonight on a separate line. Thank you to Jessica Zito and Benito Quesada, who are our Spanish interpreters. Thank you to Yanatul Tazari and Farhana Mobin, who are our Bangla interpreters. And thank you to Reina Amir and Hadir Alamari, who are our Arabic interpreters. We will now announce instructions in Spanish, Bangla, and Arabic for attendees who may wish to dial into the interpretation lines at this time. Can we please provide the instructions in Spanish?
Opciones en español. Good evening. The following message is going to be in Spanish, offering interpretation services. Buenas noches a todos. Bienvenidos a este su foro comunitario. Si desean escuchar esta reunión en español con una interpretación simultánea, por favor, marque desde su teléfono el número 888-475-4499 con el número PIN o código de acceso 735-255-1, perdón, el código de acceso 735-255-0102, numeral. Una vez más, para escuchar esta interpretación simultánea en español para esta reunión, por favor, marque desde su teléfono el número 888-475-4499 con el código de acceso o número PIN 735-255-0102, numeral. Si usted desea permanecer en este espacio virtual viendo la reunión en su computadora o en su dispositivo, asegúrese de bajar el volumen o apagar el micrófono de su dispositivo y marque el número 888-475-4499 con el código de acceso o número PIN 735-255-0102, numeral. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Benito. And can we please now have the instructions in Bangla?
থ্যাংক ইউ। বাংলায় আপনারা যারা এই অনুষ্ঠানটি শুনতে চান, দয়া করে আপনারা নিম্নোক্ত নাম্বারে ডায়াল করবেন। নাম্বারটা হলো 888-475-4499, এরপরে 933-059-663, দুইবার পাউন্ড চাপ দিবেন। আবার নাম্বারটা বলছি 888-475-4499 নাম্বারে ডায়াল করার পরে 933-059-663, দুইটা পাউন্ড চাপ দিবেন। এটা আমাদের পিন। এই অনুষ্ঠানটা যদি আপনারা পুরোটা দেখতে চান, দয়া করে আপনাদের কম্পিউটার এবং আপনাদের যে ফোনের যে মিউট বাটনটা আছে এটা বন্ধ রেখেন আপনাদেরকে বাংলায় বলার সুবিধার জন্য। আবারও নাম্বারটা বলছি 888-475-4499, এই নাম্বারে ডায়াল করার পরে 933-059-663 এবং দুটো পাউন্ড এটা পিন চাপ দিবেন এই অনুষ্ঠানটি বাংলায় শোনার জন্য। ধন্যবাদ। থ্যাংক ইউ।
Thank you, Fahana. And can we please provide the instructions in Arabic?
السلام عليكم. على الراغبين بسماع الترجمة باللغة العربية الاتصال على نمرة التليفون 877-853-5257. بعدها الضغط على الرمز الداخلي 961-789-741. بعدها علامة الهاشتاج أو الشباك. مرة أخرى على الراغبين بسماع الترجمة باللغة العربية الاتصال على نمرة التليفون 877-853-5257. بعدها الضغط على رمز 961-789-741. بعدها علامة الهاشتاج أو الشباك. على الراغبين بسماع الترجمة بصورة واضحة وضع المتكلم على الصامت أو الميوت لكي تستطيعوا سماع الترجمة بصورة واضحة. سوف نقوم بالإجابة على أسئلتكم واستفساراتكم في نهاية هذه الحلقة. مرة أخرى على الراغبين بسماع الترجمة باللغة العربية الاتصال على رقم 877-853-5257. بعدها الضغط على الرمز 961-789-741. بعدها علامة الهاشتاج أو الشباك. شكرا. Arabic announcement has been completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Hadir. If you need closed captioning on the meeting once it starts, please click on the CC button at the bottom of the screen. All participants will be able to listen to this meeting via computer audio or by phone, and the council will be asking questions of the Chancellor when the Q&A portion of the meeting begins. If you have a technical question at any time during the town hall, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen to type your question, and we will respond. Again, the Q&A feature of this meeting is for technical questions. If your Zoom name is different from the name you used to register and you would like to be renamed, you may also type this into the Q&A space and we will rename you. Now that I have shared how tonight's meeting will work, I wanted to give an opportunity for our council members to give brief introductions. And I'd like to call upon first our President of Community Education Council 8, Farah Despain.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Farah Despain, as Jesse said, the president of the CC8.
Thank you, Farah. And next, I'd like to call First Vice President and Borough President appointee, Ms. Lourdes Jabot.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lourdes Jabot, CEC Vice President 1 and Bronx Borough appointee.
Thank you, Lourdes. Next, I'd like to call upon Councilmember Latoya Coleman, Second Vice President and IEP Representative.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Latoya Coleman, Vice President 1. Vice President 2.
Thank you, Latoya. Next, I'd like to call Councilmember Gina Staton, who is the Recording Secretary.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gina Staton, Recording Secretary, CEC 8.
Thank you, Gina. Next, I'd like to call Councilmember Sandra De Jesus, who is the Council's Treasurer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sandra De Jesus, CEC Treasurer.
Thank you,
CEC
Sandra.
8 Treasurer.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Next, I'd like to call Councilmember Sabrina Rocio, who is a member of the Council.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sabrina Rocchio, and I am a council member for CEC 8. Welcome.
Thank you, Sabrina. Next, I'd like to call Councilmember Crystal Brockington.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a council member. I appreciate you guys coming out, and hopefully this will be a very productive night for us.
Thank you so much. And lastly, I'd like to call Councilmember Aurora Ronda, who is also the second Borough President appointee on the Council.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Aurora Ronda, the Borough President appointee for Community Education Council, District 8.
Thank you, Aurora. Thank you, council members. I also wanted to take this opportunity to introduce our Bronx Executive Superintendent, Erica Tabaya, to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. Great to be in District 8, and it's just wonderful to see so many familiar faces and so many names that I recognize. Just really happy to be here to support tonight.
Thank you, Executive Superintendent. I also want to take this opportunity to introduce District 8 Superintendent Jennifer Joint to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We are so excited for our CC8 to be hosting this town hall with our Chancellor, and we're so glad you're with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. And lastly, I'd also like to give an opportunity and introduce our District 8 High School Superintendent, Ms. Sabrina Cook, to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you. I was a principal in District 8 until recently. I was a D8 parent. And so it's always nice to be in community with my D8 family. So thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the President of Community Education Council 8, Ms. Farah Despain.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for that. And you are so good with the timing, right on time. So is our Chancellor with us? May I start? Yes. Okay, so good evening, everyone. A special good evening to Chancellor Banks and the esteemed leaders of New York City, of the New York City Department of Education. Welcome to what we hope is the first of many CEC 8, the Chancellor Banks conversations, as we endeavor to reimagine the New York City public school system and how education is delivered to our precious children who are the future of our city in every capacity. This is a sobering reality we must not lose sight of as we debate the particularities of a school system that needs to meet the needs of every child who attends a New York City public school. This vision necessarily necessitates a multi-tiered and multi-layered system that is able to deliver simply, directly, and efficiently the type of education each child needs. Mr. Chancellor, like the children of the Waltons, the Dumases, the Rockefellers, and the Kennedys, the children of the poor and the ever-disappearing middle class in District 8 and all over the city dream of receiving the academic and life skills, the confidence, the leadership, and the resilience that will make them the masters of their fates and the captains of their souls, as articulated in the clear tenets of the Eagle Academy that you are so familiar with. and do not wish to be at the mercy of politics or special interest groups and big business when it comes to their education and their futures. At CEC 8, we understand that our children becoming the masters of their fate and the captains of their souls requires them to be the architects of their lives, something that can only be made possible in partnership with their parents through education policies that respond to their needs and not further subjugate them to the will of others who are more powerful, richer, and with more access to policymakers. When I think of the struggle for equitable education for poor children, especially poor BIPOC children who are left behind in greater numbers, I'm often reminded of Ralph Ellison's novel, Invisible Men. In it, he writes, "I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. Like the bodiless heads you see sometimes in circus sideshows, it is as though I have been surrounded by mirrors of hard, distorting glass. When they approach me, they see only my surroundings themselves or figments of their imagination, and did everything and anything except me. I am an invisible man. No, I am not a spook like those who hunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms, excuse me. I'm a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids, and I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible simply because people refuse to see me." Mr. Chancellor, as a school leader who made it your mission to develop a strong parent apparatus for parents to accompany their children on their education journeys, we beseech you to see parents and parent leaders and not render them invisible. For they are crucial partners to the DOE and have substance and minds that will prove to be inextricably tied to your success as a chancellor, to the success of Mayor Adams, the success of the DOE as an institution, and the success of every DOE personnel. With these words, I welcome to the CEC 8 platform a man who needs no introduction, Mr. Chancellor David C. Banks. Chancellor, the floor is yours.
President Despain, I believe we are still, Chancellor will be on in one moment. I think there's just an issue with logging in. Give us one moment, President Despain and everyone.
Not a problem. Oh my goodness. I hope I don't have to do that again, do I?
No, I believe the Chancellor is here.
And heard every word, I hope. I wrote them specifically just for him.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear? Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I heard your introduction. I just, something was going on. I was speaking, but you couldn't hear me. Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome, welcome.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction. Now I've got some people from my team who are here as well, and I'm anxious to hear from the folks and hear some of the issues and the concerns that people have. And you know, I've just finished my first month really in office, and it's been a whirlwind, Madam Chairperson. It has been so many things that have been going on, but it has been very exciting as well. And I'm here because I love New York City, and I love the children and the families of New York City. And it is my job and my goal to do everything that I can to try and give the best educational experience that I can to all of our children. And so I'm excited about it. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. And more importantly, you know, a lot of times I do these forums and people want to hear me do a lot of talking. And but I want to get to it. I want to hear what people are thinking, and I want to figure out how we work together with some of the best ideas to make change for our community. So let's do it. Let's do it.
so much, Mr. Chancellor. And I think, yes, we do hope to discuss, but I think right now we have a few questions for you in terms of your vision. So I will pass the microphone, a virtual microphone, to Lourdes Jubod to ask the question about your vision of education for us.
Good evening, Chancellor. Good evening, staff and everyone here. Thank you for joining us tonight. The next comment and questions are regarding vision of education. The destabilization caused by the pandemic and the mishandling of schools during the pandemic, from the botched hybrid model of the 2020-2021 school year to the insane 2021-2022 full in-person reopening without a remote option that has caused staff shortage, lack of real and equitable instruction, coupled with pre-pandemic inequities and poor performance by too many of our schools. What is your vision for the education of our children in terms of addressing the current insanity in our schools? For example, spread of virus, increased violence, lack of general support, and the lack of mental health support for our staff, students, and parents, the lack of instructions due to shortage of staff and shortage of qualified staff, overextended and exhausted staff, just to name a few. Reestablishing or creating new instructional norms to recover from the comprehensive losses caused by the pandemic, taking schools, especially schools in poor BIPOC communities, to higher and equitable levels of achievement, as we have been far behind the 8 ball for decades now. And lastly, will your process of implementation and system reform be made available to parents and the public for commentary, ratification, and most importantly, for purpose of accountability, full transparency, and effective communication to make the system navigable for all?
Wow, that was a mouthful. I didn't hear. Can you? No, that was a big. That was a lot. But I think the general notion there is that our system has a lot of problems, and there's a lot that has to be fixed. And there were a lot of problems, truth be told, before the pandemic. The pandemic just exposed and exacerbated a lot of issues and challenges that we already knew that existed. I would never have taken this job if I didn't think that I could lead a group of people to begin to change and turn this around. I believe very deeply in the young people. You know, I was a New York City school principal for 11 years. And I believe, first of all, very deeply in all of our young people. I believe in lifting up their voice for change. I think they have to be at the table as well as we begin to figure out what is the best path forward and how do you make change. And I believe very deeply, I'm a person of the community. I believe very deeply in engaging our parents. So let me tell you kind of like my 4 pillars, if you will, my 4 major points of what I think is going to take to turn the system around. Okay. Number 1 is to what I call scale, sustain, and restore what works. Scale, sustain, and restore what works. So what does that mean? That means even though we have a lot of problems in the DOE, we actually have a lot of really good things that are happening in the DOE as well. And if we live on that side of the line about just what all the problems are, you will miss the other side, which is there are tremendous innovation, creativity, phenomenal programs that are happening. I want to lift up the good things that are happening. Part of the reason why sometimes that's a challenge is because every time you have a new mayor and they hire a new chancellor, they only want to focus on the new things that they are starting. And then good things that have happened in the past, they stop funding it, they get rid of it because their name isn't on it. We're not doing that this time. With Mayor Adams, we have said we want to scale excellence. So wherever your school is, if you've got a phenomenal ELS program or your school is doing a great job with special education students, or you've got a phenomenal math program, we're going to identify those programs and we're going to lift them up. We're going to celebrate them and we're going to share them. I'm going to be having a big speech that I'm going to give on Tuesday morning at Tweed, and I'm going to be announcing my full vision for the Department of Education. And one of the things is I'm going to stop referring to it as the Department of Education. We're going to be calling it New York City Public Schools. We're the only place in the country that refers to it as the Department of whatever. It's not a department. Parents don't send their children to a department. They send their children to schools. And we want to lift that up and make sure that that's happening. So that's the first pillar: scale, sustain, and restore what works. We're good? Second pillar, we're going to reimagine how our students learn in the first place. Going to reimagine that, and we're going to put in a whole host of things that are going to change the very dynamic of how our kids are being educated in the first place. When you hear Mayor Eric Adams say that we have a $38 billion budget in our schools, that's billion with a B. And yet 65% of Black and brown children never achieve proficiency in reading. Isn't that a betrayal? And it's because we're not teaching our kids how to read from a very fundamental approach. 25 years ago, we went into a whole nother way of teaching reading, and it has failed miserably for most kids, and particularly for children of color. It's what we refer to as a whole language approach. And many of us, when we went to school, we learned how to read, we learned through what was called a phonetic approach to reading. And we got away from that. Well, we're coming back to the way that we know that it works. And I'm going to ensure that every child by third grade will know how to read. Because if you don't do that, everything else, you're fighting an uphill battle. Because after the third grade, our children are supposed to learn, read to learn. And you can't do high level math and so many other things if you don't even know how to read. So I'm going to ensure that that happens. That's the second pillar. But part of the second pillar is also creating career pathways. Why do our kids go to school in the first place? We want them ultimately to be able to graduate and to get a good job and have a good career. If they go to college, fine. If they don't go to college, we still want them to be able to be in a career that will put them on a track to the middle class. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that our young people, particularly those that are coming out of high school, will have the skills that they need to be able to take really viable jobs that have a future, where they can come off of mommy and daddy's payroll and they can do for themselves and they can take care of themselves. It's shameful that we graduate so many kids who don't know how to do much. So we give them a diploma that's kind of worthless. I want to change that. I want kids to be involved in democracy and civics so that they understand how government works, how democracy works, so that they can take their place in it. So there's many more pieces to this. I want them to be engaged with the business community so that they understand how the economy works, financial literacy. You know how many children we graduate, they don't even know how to even open up a bank account for themselves. What are we doing? We can do better, we will do better. The third pillar is we're gonna make sure we're prioritizing wellness. We're gonna make sure that in light of this pandemic, the mental health challenges of our kids are great, but we can do something about it. We have funded every school in the city to be able to afford to hire a social worker if they deem that that's something that they want at their school, which can be very helpful during these very stressful times. But I also want to make sure that we're teaching our kids how to heal themselves. So as I travel around the city, so many schools are teaching kids mindfulness. It's a beautiful thing to see. Mindfulness is a practice of self-introspection, how to how to be at peace with yourself and in your own spirit and in your own body. So that even when you're faced with trauma around you, you know how not to lash out violently, but how to keep yourself at peace. It's a skill that you can really take with you for the rest of your life. And lots of schools around New York City are already doing this. We're going to expand that across all of the schools. The great outdoor, healthy eating. You know, it was funny the other day, you know, as we launched the vegan Fridays, and we heard from a lot of kids and families that it didn't go so well. But again, listen, it's just the beginning. The whole idea is just to make sure that our kids are getting exposed to healthy meals, promote a healthy mind and body. That's where we're trying to go. So we'll fix it as we go along, but that's the goal. And then finally, that we will not roll out new initiatives, new policies, unless parents are front row and center with us. The parents are going to help us to create all of the things that we need to do going forward in our schools. So those are my 4 pillars. And everything that we do to wrap around that.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. I do want you to know that we have at least 10 questions. So although I hate to ask the boss to be succinct, but if you can help us.
It was a long answer to a long question.
That is true. And now I will pass the virtual microphone to Crystal Blackington for a question on shared governance, which I think you partly answered, but we'll get into more details. Go ahead, Crystal.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so first off, thank you, Chancellor, for attending this town hall with us, giving us parents the opportunity to voice our opinions. And on a side note, I hear that you're willing to do these changes and you're looking to implement things that are going to benefit our kids. I would like to personally point out that I know an executive superintendent who should be on your team. And there's probably about 200 people on this call who would agree with me. So I'm just put that on your plate for free. Dr. Tabaya, you need to work with her. Go on and reach out tomorrow if you can. Okay,
we have a question on that because I couldn't wait. I have to tell you, our superintendent and our executive superintendent are very popular with us. But
yes,
go ahead,
I forgot about you as well. Put them on your team. Most valuable players. I feel like you would benefit. Okay, so back to my question. I'm sorry. So my question is regarding shared governance. First off, with many parents set to organize and mobilize around the ending mayoral control because of the systematic unresponsiveness to the needs of the parents and the students, as exemplified by what some characterize as bullying, and the total disregard and dismissal of our parental input in decisions on what is in the best of the child's interests. This is being further compounded by state legislature set to modify mayoral control in what appears to be a shoddy attempt to avoid the implication of racism by taking away control from an African-American mayor, when this same desolence was not applied to any of his predecessors. Mr. Chancellor, parents in District 8 and all over the city have long wanted to have a voice in the selection of the U.S. Secretary of Education and the New York City Education. And I would like to know, how do you and the mayor plan to foster a shared governance in partnership with parents to really engage our concerns and offer a full seat at the table of policy and decision-making to avert a showdown between unsatisfied parents and this administration 4 years from now? Secondly, Chancellor, you recently announced that superintendents will have to reapply for their positions, and it has been rumored that the position of the borough executive superintendent may altogether be eliminated. How will you ensure that parents will have a say in what position and what school official stays or goes? As it is no secret to you that District 8 parents and the Bronx parents have been quite skillful at molding their executive superintendent, formerly the superintendent of District 8, and our current District 8 superintendent into the leaders who are responsive to the trials and tribulations of the Bronx students, parents, and our community.
All right, see, there's another one. That was a long question.
I can shorten it for you if you want. How are you going to make sure that, one, we have a say in what happens with our kids, and two, we have a say in who sits on our panel as the superintendent and executive superintendent? I'll be direct if you need me to.
There you go. I know, listen, I heard you loud and clear. So I got it. And let me just say this. With this chancellor, you will not have to complain that parents don't have a seat at the table. That's part of who I am. That's how I move. And this is not just rhetoric. I was a principal for 11 years. You talk to any parents who had anything to do with me at Eagle Academy, and they will tell you how I move. I believe I don't see parents through a deficit lens. I see parents as assets. I see parents as people who ought to be respected and who ought to be sought out for what your thoughts are. So how does that play out in this regard? If we were to make any changes with superintendents, parents will absolutely be at the table and playing a major role. So if you involve a District 8 or the Bronx or whatever, you will absolutely have a seat at the table. Now, I have not announced anything yet. The newspapers have reported that I have announced certain things that I have not said officially. But we will see what happens in the coming days. But rest assured, I'm not going to be engaged in a process where, because we have mayoral control, that I go behind closed doors and make selections without engaging not just parents, families, community members, elected officials. They all are stakeholders. They all represent the village, and including students, young people, because I greatly respect them and their voices as well. I don't know how to move any other way. That's who I am. And so stay tuned. If we engage in a process of change, you will be central to that. Okay? So just know that. That's a pledge you just heard from me to you.
Thank you so much, Chancellor, for that. And we're going to hold it to you. We're going to hold you to it because, you know, we have some synergy going on here in the Bronx. So next, for our third question, it will be on school safety, and it will be Latoya Coleman asking the question.
Good evening, Chancellor. Welcome you once again.
You.
Question 3 on school safety. Poor BIPAC parents in underserved communities and many parents throughout the city have felt rather insulted by the type of dangerous narrative advanced by Mayor Adams and you that schools are the safest place for kids, insinuating that children are not safe at home with the very people who take care of them every day and have been nurturing them their whole lives, to justify a disastrous and catastrophic school reopening without a remote option and adequate coronavirus mitigation measures. Mayor Adams has even said himself that when kids are not in school, they are on the streets committing crimes. 1, will you please share with us the data and the charts that show how unsafe children are at home and how safe they are in school that would substantiate such generalizations? 2, how do you reconcile the numbers in terms of COVID contraction by staff and students in school, the chronic bullying in schools, the increased violence and gun violence in schools, and in our mass transit, and in our streets that actually paralyze parents when they think about the risk their children must take to be in school every day? Not to mention the debate about whether or not schools can learn under these circumstances and whether or not poor children should risk their safety and their lives to receive 2 meals a day or for parents to receive childcare for their children, since we know that schools must stay open for those purposes as well. 3, what is your safety plan to reduce and eradicate COVID, bullying, and violence in our schools? And will that plan be available to parents and the public at large for commentary, ratification, and participation? And 4, how do you propose that a paramilitary agency such as the NYPD, who protects and serves and is currently reverting to previous enforcement practices, will not exacerbate the school to prison pipeline? How will you ensure that school safety agents are trained in youth development practices, conflict resolution, and held accountable with parent input?
So again, that's a lot. That's not one question. That's like 5 questions wrapped up in a wrapper that said one question. Part 1, 2. I don't even know where to start. Listen, I think Chris Grove might be on with me here. If Chris is on, I'm gonna have you jump on in a moment from with us at New York City Public Schools, is to talk a little bit about just some of the numbers on the COVID front. But just know this, from the moment that I got here, and we can provide this to you. I don't know if it's getting into it in response to this question now, but we can certainly send it out to you. We've been briefed many times about the actual data. One thing, we can all have our opinions, but the actual data that we have been shown has told us very clearly that our students are not contracting COVID in school. The numbers are extremely low, extremely low. And in fact, much lower than what it looks like in the general community. Now, I know that part of the question wasn't necessarily your question. You were reading it for somebody, I think, but the idea that, Mayor Adams said, if they're not in school, they're just going to be running around the streets committing crime. He never said that. What he was saying was that the data is showing us that our kids are actually safer in schools. And it's because of a whole host of things. The air purifiers that we put there, the kids are wearing masks, the vaccinations from the teachers. You've got more children actually contracting COVID when they're maybe around. We might say, a lot of us like to think that our homes are just completely safe because the people there love them. But the kids are getting contracting the virus more from, their uncle who lives in the house, or somebody else who's coming by, and people who are visiting. The schools are actually the safest places to be. It may seem counterintuitive, but that's really what it is. And that's what the data is showing us. I don't know if we want to spend a lot of time, but we can send you the data that you can share with all the members of the CEC. And I'm going to ask Chris just to tee that up, and we can work through Mark, Christina, others, and just to send that out to your leadership, and you can share that. It was not information that I knew before becoming chancellor, but I have been briefed from Dr. Chosky and so many others on this issue. As it relates to safety in our schools, there's a lot of work that we have to do. We've lost a lot of school safety officers. We used to have over 5,000 school safety officers, and we're now down around 3,400. We're way down. So that is an area that I'm concerned about. But even if we increase the number of school safety officers, school safety officers doesn't necessarily mean our schools are going to be dramatically more safe. We have to be the ones that make our schools safer. I'm going to be looking to engage a host of organizations, people from the community who are credible messengers, violence interrupters, people who know what's really going on in the streets, who understand some of the beef that is actually happening. We're finding a lot of our kids who are bringing weapons to school, but they're not bringing them to school to fight other kids in school. They don't have a problem necessarily with the kids in the school. It's their journey to and from school. They got issues that are going on in the neighborhoods. And we've seen the proliferation of guns. If we can't bring down the amount of guns that are out here in the streets, we're all in trouble. And so that's what the mayor has made his first priority, is we've got to get these guns off the streets. I mean, people are just going out to dinner with your family and bullets are flying. I grew up in a police household. My dad was a lieutenant. My brother, some people here may know, my brother was the top cop in New York. He was the chief of the department. He's now the deputy mayor for public safety. He works with the police commissioner, and their goal is to reduce crime and get these guns off the streets. If we don't do that, it's going to be major problems for all of us. And I think we can see what's playing out every single day. So we've got to do that. But it doesn't mean we're going back to the days with throwing kids up against the wall and treating everybody like they're a bunch of criminals. No, that's not where we're going. That's not who Mayor Adams is. That's not who I am. I just want to make sure that your child is safe. Not only from guns and bullets, but I want to make sure that your child is safe from bullying. I want to make sure that your child feels emotionally safe wherever they are. And that's going to require all of us working together. It's going to require the leadership in the district. As you said, the superintendent's going to play a big role in that. The school principals have to play a big role. And all of us working together. Because at the end of the day, kids feel safe when they have great relationships with the people in their schools. When they feel safe that way, that's when we can ensure that they can have a good school experience. So there's a lot of work to be done on this, and you'll be hearing more about it in the coming days.
Thank you so much for that, Chancellor. And I will just push back a little bit before I pass the microphone to Aurora Wanda, the virtual microphone, that, if kids are busy catching COVID at home, as you may suggest, as you have suggested, then when they go to school, aren't they spreading it? And because at least if they were at home with their uncle with COVID, then it would just stay within the household. But now they are going to school with it, where they may be spreading it. Just a thought.
The reality is that the percentages of our people who are getting COVID is not high at all. First of all, the COVID numbers are dropping. We are on the other side of this pandemic. We hope. Well, I'm telling you, the numbers are showing that. Doesn't mean that there's not another variant going to come, but that's just the truth. That's just the truth. Are coming back to school. My very first day as chancellor, the attendance in our schools was 65%. Today it was 89.4. It's one of the reasons why we didn't go to a remote option. We were looking at it. We were meeting with students, elected officials who were asking us to do it. We had organized ourselves. We had teed up to do that. But we're almost back to our normal attendance rates even before the pandemic. So, but what we're going to do is we are going to be much more ready when, God forbid, a new variant comes and we're faced with a new challenge. And so that's what you're going to hear me talking about next week. Next week, Tuesday, I'm going to be giving a big speech about the future of education for our schools, and I'll be talking more about these issues. So stay tuned on that.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. And now the virtual microphone goes to Aurora for a question on communication and inclusiveness.
Aurora, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Farah and Chancellor Banks. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm speaking on community and inclusivity. Synergy around education is beginning to happen in District 8 and in the Bronx because for the first time in a long time, perhaps ever, parents are taking their seat at the table or are being invited to take their seat at the table, largely due to a parent advocacy movement that is gaining strength every day, and largely due to principals, superintendents, executive superintendents, including former Chancellor Ross Porter, when she was our executive superintendent, from tea and talk with superintendent to District 8 to just us meetings with the Bronx executive superintendent. Parents are sitting with and having heart-to-heart and mind-to-mind conversations with school leaders. The results is a series of innovation that are beyond wonderful, that are building bridges from school communities to the community at large, and everyone is learning, leading, creating, and building. And we are seeing results in relatively short periods of time. The only problem is none of it is institutionalized. If we lose anyone on the DOE side or anyone on the parent side, these initiatives are likely to die. The bottom line is that parents wish to be thought partners in discussions with DOE and youth servicing city agencies as it relates to the best interests of their children. How will you work to ensure that this work that is happening in the Bronx will continue and will become system-wide practice with full transparency and complete inclusivity?
Love that question. I love that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, because when it speaks to who I am, it speaks to my value system. I respect parents. I respect families. And above all else, I respect community because I love community. I'm from the community. That's why I'm here. I'm a product of the community, you know? And so that it touches me deeply. And I came here to lead in this system on behalf of parents and families and community members. I didn't come here to be a dictator. I didn't come here to be the king of the school system. That doesn't mean anything to me. If you tell me, if you tell me things are working really, really well in District 8, and you feel like you have great leadership there, and we can point to data that's showing how things are moving well, I want to celebrate that. I'm not trying to change that. I don't want to throw that out. If that is in fact the case, what I have to do is to look at it and see if that's the case. Because one of the things I will tell you, it's very interesting when you sit in a seat like this. When certain parents will advocate for a superintendent. We love them. Don't do it. Whatever you do, don't change them. And when I get off the call, somebody will call me and say, I know that's what they said, but let me tell you the other side of the story. Trust me. So, you know, even when we talk about parents don't all agree with each other. Right? Their parents will sit in the same room. And some people will say yay, and other people will say nay. So when they say, Mr. Chancellor, you should listen to the parents, you have to listen. It doesn't mean you're always going to agree, but you try to work together to build a level of consensus where most of us are, to build the best path forward. Not necessarily a perfect path, but the best path forward. And if you talk to anybody who's ever known me in any part of my career, that's who I am. That's what I do. That's how I lead. And it's not so that I'm acting like I'm the boss or I'm in charge. Not at all. I have no idea. I may be here as a chancellor for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Who knows? I don't know. It's not about me. So, but I agree with you. I want to work on that. How can we put something in place that becomes institutionalized, where you have some deeper systems that really will respect parents? So that if the next chancellor comes or the next mayor comes, you can't just throw it out. That's what we should be about. Really institutionalizing good practice. And so let's continue to talk about that, because that's very intriguing to me.
Thank you so much for that, Chancellor. And I do want to add one thing, right? Because we said synergy is happening, right? Which means that although it's happening, the data to prove it may not necessarily be there. And that doesn't mean if the data is not there, that it's not happening and therefore should be stopped. So,
that's right.
So I just want to put that out there, and thank you for that. So we'll talk more, right? I hope. So now we'll get to question number 5, Crystal Blackington again, and this time it's about the intersection of government agencies and schools and the abuse of power.
Uh-oh. Did you just, Don't be scared. While intersectionality may be a natural part of life, and while intersectionality of government may be necessary and even helpful in schools, for many of us parents who bear the burden of coarse reality of governmental dominance in certain practices, such as weaponizing the ACS against parents, the ability of the NYPD to arrest children inside of school buildings, the lack of coordination and communication between the criminal justice system and the schools in respect to absenteeism and academics, the threat that has been intermittently levied against parents regarding the loss of their public assistance and SNAP benefits essential to the support and development of their families, and even threats of ICE reporting. These acts of intimidation are downright intrusive infringement upon the rights of parents and the denial of basic human rights. They constitute an abhorrent abuse of power against a vulnerable population of parents, especially those in low-income and underserved communities. My question is, how do you plan to improve the communication among schools and intersecting agencies to keep the moment of intersectionality, family and education centered with an understanding and empathy for families with the goal of doing no harm? And two, to not further traumatize parents in the middle of a pandemic who still do not trust the public school system to keep their children safe, and to actively work with these agencies for the well-being of these families.
One thing I'm gonna tell you, y'all gonna get the record for the longest question in the history. I don't care what other CEC I go to. This y'all gonna have y'all have set the new the longest questions I've ever heard. Listen, here's the deal. What you are speaking to is representative of everything that Mayor Adams has talked about. It is the dysfunction of government. People operate in silos, ACS, housing, NYPD, DOE, folks serving a lot of the same people, but because we're not connecting with each other, you can't create the best plan to support everybody. I remember when I was even thinking about accepting this position, I asked my brother, I said, how often did the police commissioner meet with the chancellor? Like, did they meet every month to sit and talk about issues? You know what he told me? Never. He said, if you sit and have meetings with the police commissioner, you'll be the first chancellor in history that has regular meetings with the police commissioner. They never met. But just think about that for a second. They represent two of the biggest agencies within the city, and they never sit down and meet to talk about the intersectionality of the folks that we're trying to deal with. That's dysfunction. That is exactly what Mayor Adams has been talking about. His whole goal of his administration is to break the cycle of that and show this connection with all of us being on the same page. I'll give you an example. Pay attention tomorrow. The mayor is going to give a huge speech about a young man who was just killed on Sunday, 18 or 19 years old. The reason he's giving this speech, he's focusing on the plight of Black and brown boys, but think beyond that. What he's talking about, he's going to talk about this little boy, this 18-year-old, before he was killed, he was a little boy growing up with his mother. And how every agency within the city failed him and his mother. And for him to die at 18, 19 years old did not have to be that way. But it was that way because all these agencies operate in a silo. They don't talk to each other. They don't connect with each other. And many of them don't care deeply enough to make a difference. Government has to operate much better than that if we're really going to be true to why we are here and what we're supposed to be doing in these roles. That is exactly the vision of Mayor Adams. I'm telling you, listen out for his speech that he's going to give tomorrow, because he's going to talk about this one young man as representative of everything that you just said in your question, and how when city agencies don't work together, it ends up in disaster. And so I'm glad to be here, not to be the chancellor. I'm glad to be here because I want to be part of a winning strategy that will help make life better for our kids and their families. People shouldn't be afraid that somebody's going to get ACS to come and get them. It's sickening to me when I hear those kinds of things. We can do better and we will do better. That's why I'm here, to be a part of a solution that is going to make that really is going to make a difference. And we're going to need you all to keep working with us and hold us accountable to that. So I thank you for the question. I appreciate every question that's been asked so far. The spirit in which you're asking these questions mean a lot to me, because they speak to who I am as a person and the reason I took this job in the first place. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Chancellor, and we want to be your advisors,
Yeah.
because we have a lot of answers. And now we'll move on to question 6.
A lot of long questions too.
Well, we got to pack everything in. We're only going to get this chance like we don't know when, and now we're moving on to question number 6 from Aurora Monday again concerning APA and FSF. Aurora, unmute yourself. We're still on time. Time. Come on.
New York City schools are finally fully funded with monies from the American Recovery Plan Act and fair student funding. With all the competing needs and programs, both new and old, that need to be funded in order for the DOE to truly educate our children while attending their social and emotional well-being. 1, what is your plan to utilize monies well, knowing that these funds will dry up in the next 3 years? What is your plan to sustain these programs and to continue to fund them beyond allotted years? And 3, will your plan for the monies be made available to parents and the public at large for commentary, ratification, and an opportunity for parents to participate in its implementation?
Love it. Love it. First of all, I think we should be joined by our first Deputy Chancellor. I think it's important. I want to bring Dan on at this point. Just so you also, because I think it's also important to know that we got a great team also in place with us at Tweed, and so Dan, are you on with us tonight?
I am indeed, Chancellor. I'm here.
Great. So this is Dan Weisberg, everybody. He's the first Deputy Chancellor. I'm thrilled to have him on our team. He's helping me to build out the whole model that's going to help us to be successful. He had spent some time at Tweed years ago and did a phenomenal job. He's done amazing work all over the country, helping school districts all across the nation. And he agreed to come back here. He's not from the Bronx, but don't hold that against him. He's from Brooklyn. And so Dan, as a Brooklyn boy, they want to know, what are we going to do with this money and how are we going to engage our parents in this process?
Yeah, thanks, Chancellor, for ruining the whole thing by saying I'm from Brooklyn and not from the Bronx. So now nobody's going to listen to anything. And yes, I'm a Mets fan. I do not like the Yankees. So you might as well just start throwing stuff at the screen now. But just being honest, being transparent. No, it's a great question because you are absolutely right. We're very fortunate that we got a lot of funding from the federal government. Some of which was critical already over the last year or so to pay for things like the air purifiers that are in every classroom. That costs money. The KN95 masks that we're giving out to staff, all the tests that hopefully you all have been able to access if you need them, the home test kits and the sites for our staff to go in and get tested, get PCR tests. So and to improve the ventilation system. So some of that money, frankly, was already spent on that. But there are still monies that we can spend over the next few years. And I know one of the things the Chancellor is committed to, this is, I think, week 6, I kind of lost count, is engaging on questions just like that, including how we are gonna spend that money. And I will just give a preview. So we would love to come back just to talk about that, just to talk about the funding and where you all think it should be prioritized. As the Chancellor said, it's not for us to make these decisions by ourselves downtown. It's to come out and hear from you all, from your children, from the educators, from the community leaders in District 8 to decide how we're going to prioritize these funds. And look, I want to be further honest. We're going to have some difficult choices over the next few years, because as much as we have this funding, it is temporary. It's only for a few years. We don't want to put our schools in a situation a few years from now where we're taking money away and they have to, eliminate or excess teachers or guidance counselors or anybody else. So we got to be very smart and prudent about that. But what I certainly don't want to do is say, here's the plan, and we want you to say yay or nay. We want to engage, as the chancellor says, with you and with parents and families and students and community leaders around the city to tackle questions just like this. And we will be very transparent about the trade-offs of the different priorities. There's going to be no one perfect answer to questions like this. It's all going to be about trade-offs. If we invest money here, that means we have less money here. What is most important? What is going to make the most difference in the lives of your children and in the community? So stay tuned on that. We want to be back to discuss this.
That's right. And it'll look, it'll look different even from district to district. It's not going to be the same thing. So the issues that you see in your district will look, it will look different in another CEC. So, we don't want a one size fits all. Want to make sure that everybody gets what works best for them. Which, by the way, Dan, I'm getting a text from people telling me that they said, wow, your first deputy looks like George Clooney. So maybe that helps, even if you're from Brooklyn.
Not on my best day, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
Take it.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Clooney, for joining us. Chancellor, I would like to bargain for a few more minutes beyond 7:30. Is that possible?
Yeah, a few more minutes. It's a few more minutes. I got a couple.
Yes. Okay, we're gonna hurry it up because we want to get all our questions in. So, question 7 concerning instruction, and the virtual microphone goes to Gina Staten.
Good evening, Chancellor. In our education system, we affirm that every child can learn. We have students from all over the city with different academic needs. Each student has a different set of interests, gifts, talents, and aspirations. Learning styles, abilities, and socioeconomic factors also vary from one student to the next. Our current system leaves too many students behind, especially poor students in underserved communities. The pandemic and the implementation of remote learning made these differences impossible to ignore. Specifically, we see that some children did much better with remote learning than they did in person. Others were at a severe disadvantage in the remote setting due to the lack of technology available to them. Furthermore, the remote setting had varying effects on parents and families, particularly in relation to the need for childcare and concerns for the health and safety of family members who are at a greater risk due to COVID-19. How do you plan to eradicate the city's current one-size-fits-all approach to education and create a system that better addresses the varying needs of the individual child? How will you create a system that is adaptable to the needs of each student rather than one that requires the student to adjust and adapt? Lastly, how do you plan to include parents in the construction of such a system and ensure that they are not only heard but listened to, and that their advocacy on behalf of their children is taken into account?
Yep. So listen, great questions. It's important, I think, to know that even remote learning fits for me within the paradigm still of just how are we teaching our kids, and are they getting exposed to the best teaching possible? And one of the things you're going to see that's going to come from our administration is what I refer to as bright starts and bold futures. I'll be talking more about this next week. But if is Kara on today? Kara Ahmed? Just checking if Kara is with us, or
I don't believe
Kara,
so, Chancellor. I don't believe so. Not tonight.
what about Carolyn?
I am here. Yes. Can you hear me?
Hear you. Yep. And
Great.
I'd like to bit about that. Carolyn Quintana is our Deputy Chancellor for Teaching and Learning. And she is driving a lot of what our response is going to be, not only as it relates to remote learning, virtual learning, but just the fundamental nature of how we have to engage our children in a truly authentic learning experience. And so, Deputy Chancellor Quintana, if you would just take a few minutes and share with the CEC, some of our thinking.
Sure, absolutely. So we want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all of our learners. And part of that is we want to take the time really, and I think this goes to the Chancellor's first pillar of scaling and sustaining what works. Part of what that requires is finding what works. And that means visiting schools, visiting with superintendents, visiting with executive superintendents. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I was there in District 8 at Middle School 301, MS 301 Dunbar, where I had an opportunity to walk and see the work that Principal Fareed is doing around really building up a reading culture. And as the question asked, it was actually employing strategies that were adaptable, that were grounded in inquiry, where each child had an opportunity to think about how they wanted to attack the text that they were working with. And while students were doing that, they were grouped according to needs so that teachers could really address those needs in real time. And so when we find examples of something that is working like that, that is grounded in the science of reading, that is grounded in the science of learning and development, where we know that a community has been built that is safe and welcoming for our students, where there are clear relationships and there's a sense of community in the classroom, where students have been provided with positive feedback and their gifts have been acknowledged, incorporated, and celebrated, and where students have had an opportunity to be challenged and are encouraged to do problem solving and critical thinking. Those are the types of practices that we want to be able to scale, that we want to make sure that others can learn from. And so part of that is engaging the community in identifying those spaces. But the other part of that is as we explore new opportunities, as we consider new curricula, in fact, as we write new curricula, we want to make sure that we're engaging the community and we can hear from our families, we hear from our educators, and we include even the student voices in all of that so that we can, as we develop anything new, we make sure that all of those voices are included. And so we're absolutely taking a look at lots of, of what already exists in the Department of Education. We already have some ideas of places where we want to make shifts, but we won't do those until we've had an opportunity really to engage with the community around much of that. And that includes our labor partners, so that we have a more sustainable version of school in general, of remote instruction, of making sure that teachers have both the confidence and the capacity to offer blended or hybrid instruction at any given time. So even without the need for a surge or a snowstorm, because we know that every student deserves classroom instruction where they are cared for, they're challenged, and they're really held to high expectations.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Quintana.
Quintana.
Quintana, I'm sorry.
There you go. That was great.
Spanish. I'm going to learn Spanish.
That was fantastic.
Thank you. So we're going to skip over question 8 for now because you partly answered it. It's about the remote option because parents want that as a staple, right, of education, not just because there's a pandemic moving forward, right? So we're going to skip over that question because we want more time with the Chancellor. We love the Chancellor already, right? So, so question number 9 goes to Sandra De Jesus. It's about school buildings.
Good evening, Chancellor Banks.
Evening.
First of all, we are happy that former Councilmember Traeger is part of your administration. We admire him, among other things, for all the money he was able to find, to repair and build additions to school buildings, to modernize them in spite of capital plan that CECs participate in, and in spite of how principals chase in Reso A money and how principals struggle to raise money to try to modernize their buildings to meet the educational needs of students in the 21st century building. 21st century building repairs take away too many years or do not happen at all. How will you work with elected officials and principals in the Bronx to streamline how principals can obtain Reso A money from their elected officials to upgrade their buildings? 2, how will you work with the school construction authority to speed up repairs and additions to buildings? And 3, how will you work with principals and the private sector to help them raise money to upgrade their buildings, as environment and decor very much count in the preference the performance of students, since it would help if the schools were not falling apart, classes weren't taking place in hallways, bathrooms, and closets, and if their school didn't look like prisons. Thank you.
No, thank you. And how we lift up and work with our elected officials has been a priority of ours. I mean, visiting schools with elected officials, we've already started that process. They will be a very big part of what we do. I have not had my first meeting with the School Construction Authority yet, but that is coming up very soon. And the work that I have done throughout my career, I've always worked very closely with the private sector. So we're going to make sure that they are all partners for us in this space. I do want to take a moment, if Mark is on, Mark Traeger, is Mark on with us tonight? Okay, so it doesn't look like Mark was able to join us. But Mark was one of the, and has been one of the best people that we have brought on to work with us. As you know, he was the head of the City Council's Education Committee. And so he knows how the DOE functions deeply. And he has brought that expertise now to our side. And he's there with us to help us drive real change. And so just know that we've got a great champion who's now on our team, and he's helping us to really make sure that we are leading and driving all of these things. And he has the great respect of all the new members of the City Council who look up to Mark. And so we're very happy that he's part of the team. I will tell you this, we have put together an A team at New York City Public Schools. We really have. And you've met some of them, but there are others that you will meet also in the coming weeks and months as we work together with you to try to build a great path forward for all of our children. I don't want to hear any stories about people being in dilapidated buildings or schools that feel like a jail. I want to, so please, in fact, if you are witnessing that even now, I need to know that, right? And so feel free to reach out to me, let me know, because I want to go and visit. I need to see that for myself. So I know where I need to, where we need to focus our efforts, because no child should ever have to go to a school in a building that's falling apart. So everything that we can do to change those kinds of things, that's what we're going to be prepared to do. I think we may have time for just maybe one final question. I don't know if we're going to get them all in. But,
one final question, and I'll, at least my closing statement, if you don't want to make one.
You do it.
This is the best bookend question. Hello, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for spending your time. So, Chancellor Banks, imagine that it is 4 years from now. Then imagine it is 8 years from now. What do you leave as your legacy? What would you leave as your legacy?
You know, I love the question. First of all, it was the shortest question of the night. So thank you for that. Not that all the other questions are great. I'm just saying. But I would tell you that what we hope to accomplish and what we're going to work every day to accomplish is that why do we go to school in the first place? We want to put our children on a path to economic viability, right? Like I want to start out with bright starts. I want every child to know how to read and how to read well. That would be part of my legacy. But then if you look at the other end of it, I want to be remembered for transforming how our kids even experience school, that we made school relevant, that we made school fun, that we made it interesting, that kids couldn't wait to get to school because we changed how we do school. I don't want anybody to say, I'm bored in school. And then at the end of it, I want our kids to come out with some real skills, certifications, the ability to take their rightful place in the American economy, and to be young people who understand what it means to be an American, how to participate and make changes in their own neighborhoods, because they were developed in a way all throughout the kindergarten through the 12th grade experience to understand how this all works. and what role they have in it. I want everybody that graduates from high school to be registered to vote even before they graduate, and can't wait to participate in the American democracy. I don't want kids sitting on the side like they could care less. So I want them to be active, civically active and engaged. I want them to be able to get good jobs, go to college if they want. I want them to be prepared for what life will throw at them. I don't want them to wind up standing on street corners as though they have no hope for themselves, and yet we've had them for 12, 13, 14 years. So that's what I hope, that's what I want to see. It's a great question. I appreciate it. It frames everything that we need to be about every day that we're working with all of these young people. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Chancellor. And I guess I'll have my closing statement. If you won't have one, I'll be quick. Chancellor Banks, thank you so much for the time you have spent with us in deep conversation about your plans to improve how education is delivered to every child in New York City. Tonight, the District 8 Education Council wanted to impart to you its wish for you to see every child and every parent, and by extension, every education stakeholder, including DOE personnel. For at the core of every human being is the desire to be seen and to be heard. It is being seen, being heard, having our needs met, and sharing our common humanity that enables us to design sustainable systems and structures that will serve the needs and interests of all involved. Tonight, you heard our CEC members ask policy questions on your vision of education, the need for shared governance of our schools with education stakeholders and parents as partners, the need to improve safety in our schools, the need for communication and inclusiveness, the need for intersecting government agencies in our schools to be student and family centered, the need for parents to help decide how NYC schools funds are spent, the need for a pedagogically diverse instructional system to meet the academic needs of every child, the need for a remote option during the pandemic and beyond the pandemic as a tool for more targeted and differentiated instruction, the need for school buildings that fit education in the 21st century, and the need for an educational system that is responsive to students, parents, and communities first and foremost, above politics, special interests, groups, and big business. Because that is what it will take to make you a successful chancellor, Mayor Adams a successful mayor, and our students successful, and our city and nation successful. So the keyword here, successful. As you can see by our last question, we want you to be successful. And that is why we are offering you at CEC 8 the gift of an open door where you can tap into us at all times as your partner in the education of our children, but also in the steering of this complex bureaucracy that we call the DOE. As we can help you lobby at every level of government, and we can help spread your message in the community to help you garner public support for our education and community initiatives. To this end, the District 8 Community Education Council and the New York City Coalition for Educating Families together are inviting you to a series of conversations around the topics that are most important to parents in District 8, in the Bronx and throughout the city, so we can help you see and hear us better and create a more effective educational system. In the package you should receive shortly, you will find the script for this town hall, questions that you did not get a chance to answer or we didn't ask, and invitations to future conversations. Once again, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
It was a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Hope
good
you
night.
enjoyed it.
It was wonderful. I loved it. I didn't just enjoy it. I really, really, really loved it. And I love your leadership and the spirit of everybody who participated tonight. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to continuing to engage with you. I mean that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone. And this is the end of our
Have
town
a
hall.
great evening.
Good night, everyone, and
Thank you, everybody.
Chancellor Banks.
Have a good night, please.
Good night.